Okay, so I'm back at the bus. I'm going to spend an hour or two here in the front of the bus, ripping up that driver platform, getting this wood out of here, removing the here, all in preparation to remediate the probable rust that's under that driver platform and get this floor ready to be refloored. Probably going to at most add a ½ inch of insulation in this very front area, if any. There will be, as I said in the last video, there will be a door going across here, a sliding door and a wall separating the cockpit. Part of the reason for that is I'll still be working on the road, and I'd like to have a part of the bus that's closed off and still has a nice view that I can do my work in. So I likely will have a desk area for a laptop that's connected to that steering wheel, and it'll just kind of hang there, and that'll sort of be a workspace with the driver chair, and this whole area will be separated for noise so that if I have a call or whatnot, things are fairly quiet. So anyhow, that's what I'm up to, just getting the driver area dismantled here. Okay, so I ended up getting the bolts out for the seat mount for the driver's seat, so I can start taking this piece of wood out. Angle grinder, that's your friend if you're converting a bus. You definitely can't do it without some angle grinder expertise. So those bolts, because I didn't have a second person to crawl under the bus, I ended up grinding the nuts off the heads off the bolts at the top. My intention is to put a more luxurious captain's chair in here instead of that old bus seat. So swivel base and whatnot that we put in for it will likely be different than this, so I'm not worried about the damage I caused to the bottom base portion. Okay, so I'm in the middle of dismantling this underneath the dashboard stuff. I've got some really rusty bolts down by the foot pedals, no surprise there. I might end up cutting them off, but I prefer to try to take them out without damaging the foot pedal plate. So we'll try it with tools first and before I break out the angle grinder on that. But I've got one side of the heater unit loosened. Got the mouse habitat there opened up. That's leaning against the dash. I didn't want to disconnect the reservoir. You know, I saw another bus where they put the windshield wipers up top. I may end up doing that and put the wiper reservoir up high on the shelf. I have to consider that, think about it. That would let me seal up the front so that I don't have to have the opening hatches there for the windshield wipers. So I might end up doing that. That was Rick on Diesel Freak, DZL-FREEK, I believe. He's in Nevada. He's doing the same model bus as me. So anyway, so next step here, I'm trying to get this foot pedal removed. I need to find a flat blade for my impact driver. Alright, so trying to pry the brake and gas pedals off the floor here. The screws are rusted in, so that's about where I'm going to stop for the night. I'll run the vacuum, clean up a little bit, and then I'm going to take off. Okay, so this disgusting dirty old heater was giving me a bit of a fight. I did yank on it pretty good. I got it to get out. First it was just wiggling, but it was catching at the top underneath the dash there. So got it out. Now I need to disconnect the wiring harness. You'll see those multicolored wires back in here. I just need to clip the zip strips and whatnot, and then undo the connector underneath the or from the outside underneath here. You'll see it, but anyhow, that's what I'm up to, trying to get this heater out of here. This thing is a horrible gargantuan beast, and I'm pretty well convinced that I'll be replacing it in favor of some other defroster method. This thing's just taking up a honking amount of space under the dash. So we're going to get rid of it. It's antiquated, dirty, disgusting. Don't know if the blowers work, but you know, I think there's got to be a better way, probably with a diesel heater. Although I saw that Bussy McBusface ended up cracking a windshield. What I'm going to do is put my diesel heater in a different spot and diffuse it a little bit before it pipes to the front with a fan. So in the under floor space there'll be warm air, and my intention would be to run a fan with a vent up into this defroster space through like a duct of some sort. I've just got to figure out how to route that. Most likely it'll come back up through the floor from underneath the bus, but anyhow, I got to think about that plan. But this thing's just a gargantuan, heavy, smelly, old, dirty, rat-infested, just behemoth of a unit. It's, you know, definitely not worth that much space. Okay, so here's the mess we're left with. I'm going to vacuum and clean this up, and then we'll start getting it cleaned up under the driver area a little bit, finish taking that foot pedal treadle out so that we can properly treat the floor up here. Okay, so I got that wood up here. Actually, I'm pleasantly surprised there's not a lot of rust here, so looks like it can be treated pretty easily. A little bit of paint, some wire wheeling, etc. So no biggie. And there's quite a lot of nice space there to store stuff. You know, things like shoes, and have leg room for the front seat, and etc. So yeah, I'm happy that's out. Okay, so I've tied it up a little bit, pulled the screws from this metal. Now I'm going to work on disconnecting the gas and brake pedals. They are bolted. I'm going to work on disconnecting them from that plate. This plate, I'll probably cut a new one. I'll use this one as a template and cut a new one out of thick metal. I've got to look at how it's built, or I may just flatten that out and get it painted and whatnot. But so I do want to get these pedals done so I can get this this stuff off. The metal underneath actually looks pretty good. Okay, so I made some pretty good progress today up here in the front. I've determined that this brake treadle valve, I need to get under the bus and disconnect air lines if I actually want to remove all that. Got to think about that because it may not go back together very well. I could reverse what I've done so far. I think what I may do is just try to straighten that plate of metal and hit it with a wire wheel while it's sitting right there, and then cut it with some paint. Eventually I probably will replace the brake treadle, but it's probably at least $100 part for the Bendix valve underneath. You know, eventually replace it, but I don't want to do that till I'm ready to replace air lines for the braking system, which is on the agenda. If there's one thing I'm not skimping on, it's the brakes. So anyhow, I got this flooring mostly ripped up, the green stuff. This metal's still good and painted, so no worries about rust. That's what I was worried about, is making sure there was no rust under the driver's seat. Got the heater unit out. So next time I'm out here, I'm going to clean this stuff up and start coating it in this white paint. And got to think about the finish. I may coat this whole area in under like what am I trying to say? Truck bed liner is what I'm going for. I may coat this in bed liner to protect the metal from moisture as people walk in and out. I don't know. I've got to think about the design here for the front. But it's clear to me there's not going to be a chance to put much, if any, insulation here. Maybe an inch layer under here, but under the driver area, there's really, down here there's a platform, but there's really no way to do much with this other than put wood, a little bit of wood down or something. We're here in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania, weather capital of the world. We got a little rain as we loaded this insulation from Crazy Dave. Dave, do you want to be in the video?
I'll be in there.
All right, Crazy Dave, here's your man for insulation. If you're building a schoolie or anything else, look at all this stuff. And his prices are insane.
That's why they're crazy.
Okay, so I'm back at the bus today. I'm gonna cut these sheets of insulation. These here have 2 inches of insulation and then are topped on the bottom end here with OSB. These are 1-inch pieces, so I'm going to put these down first, and then these with the OSB will be the actual floor inside the bus. So it'll be 3 inches of insulation with an OSB top on it, and that will be the basic floor. And then from there I'll build platforms throughout most of the bus, which will have another floor over it. So, and that'll just be plywood with the finished flooring on the other layer. So this will be the floor that supports the systems, water, battery, etc. So anyhow, it was a very good deal. This was all together for 20 sheets of material, only $240 from Crazy Dave. So it's hard to argue with, especially since the wood's already on one side. Okay, so I'm just cutting this on the trailer since it's already here. So I'm using a razor blade for the ones that are just insulation, 1 inch thick. I've scribed a line, 87 1/4. This will be the first sheet in the back of the bus. There will be a notch where the inlet and outlet are for the bulkhead connectors for the heating system. I'm not sure if I'm reconnecting those or not, but I need to notch out so that they are available. That's another 5 inches. I'll have to look at how long I want to cut away from the wall to let those be accessed with the hoses. Probably another foot, 5 inches wide, probably a foot, 8-9 inches to a foot for the hoses if I end up putting hoses through there. Okay, so I got the first 1 inch piece in place, so that'll be underneath the OSB clad piece. Now I need to measure for that OSB 2 inch insulation. It's a little bit different because there's a little rail. You can see it over here. It's a little rail at the bottom, but then at the top I gotta be able to get the wood past the chair rail supports. So I'm gonna split the difference on the chair rail measurement versus the sides there now that we're over that lip at the bottom with the 1 inch piece. Don't know if that makes sense verbally, but anyhow, I'm gonna measure that. It'll be a slightly different measurement than the last cut. Okay, so I've got the second piece down as well, and I'll probably do about 1/3 to half the bus with the first layer, and then I'll come back with the second layer because I have the sheets all stacked on top of the ones with the OSB. But anyhow, I'll keep cutting here. Okay, so I have the first 4 pieces of 1 inch insulation down. I think at this point I'm going to catch up with the thicker stuff, so I'll have to unstack some of the 1 inch pieces to get to the thicker ones, but that's not a big deal since they're light. Okay, so the first piece went in without a hitch. My plan is to use some slotted angle on the corners and fasten these down with screws on the down direction into the wood, and then rivets into the side. Use some pieces of slotted angle. Probably do the same back in here once I put another piece down. Well, maybe a little bit before and after when I cover up this bench area. But yeah, it's a pretty good fit here for the first piece. I'm going to keep at it. Okay, so we have the first 3 pieces in. Nice tight fit on all of them. I'm pleased. This is working really well with this OSB on one side of the 2 inch insulation. It's quite handy. So next we'll do this piece, and then I'm going to transfer some of this stuff over on top of the wood here, and we'll keep going toward the front of the bus. Okay, so I've got all 4 pieces so far laid in. Looks like probably about 4 more pieces, maybe slightly less than 4 full pieces. We're going to stop right before the entry door there, right after the wheel wells. So I'm going to tidy up this space and lay down more sheets of 1 inch and we'll get her put in here. Okay, so I'm finished for today. I've got all the 1 inch insulation laid down all the way to the front here. And the next step will be the rest of the OSB clad insulation. I'll do that tomorrow. Okay, so I'm back at the bus. It's like 95 degrees. And it looks like this thin insulation kind of is pulling up from the floor in a bow. Left overnight here, but I didn't glue it down. I'm going to be using things on the side of the plywood topped insulation, so I'm sure it'll just get shoved back down when I put the weight on it. But I got some steel track to cut in half to run down the sides. I'm going to screw that into the OSB and rivet it into the sides. And after that, my intention here would be to put a coat of latex paint on the OSB. So I'm going to get after it here. Okay, so I have the 5th section laid down. Now I'm going to take measurements for the 6th, for this opening and for that fuel cover there. So we'll cut that and then we'll bring that in. Okay, so based on my measurements, I've got this cut out for the fuel access, or the sending unit access for the fuel tank. And then over here is the fuel fill. I've notched it out so that the shroud can go back over that. So now we'll take it in the bus and see that it fits. Okay, good news. I know how to use a tape measure, apparently. Of course, I better bite my tongue, otherwise the next cut will be wrong. So anyhow, got that notched out. Now I'm going to measure for the next board. And we'll put it in this way. Probably overlap into this well a little bit. I'm trying to make sure that the seams don't, that there's some overlap in the seams. I don't want them all to be in the same spot. So a couple inches gap there is a good thing. So anyhow, this one will be a more detailed cut. Probably the hardest cut of any of these boards I'm going to make. But anyhow, I'm going to take the measurements and we'll see what we get. Okay, I'm super impressed with myself here. All those cuts on one board, and it all fits like a glove. So it worked out nicely. Now for this last piece here, got to make some measurements for it, and we'll be good to go with the flooring here. After that, my intention is to use metal along the edges. We'll screw it in and rivet it down with each end of the board weighted. I'll probably use the bus seat and that cart to weight down the boards on each side while I put in that edging. So I'm going to cut some steel stud track in half and use that to edge and hold the boards down. After I've got all that done, my intention is to paint in here with latex paint. So right now I'm going to put the scraps into that hole there for the fuel tank and cover that up. Okay, so that hatch is covered there. Okay, so I've got all the wood layered insulation down for the subfloor. The next step is to cut the metal edging and get it screwed into the sides. And then after that, I'll be putting construction adhesive on the seams, and we'll put a coat of paint on this floor. Okay, so I got these steel framing tracks. My intention here is to cut the edges, or cut the middle, and I'll use, it's sort of like an angle iron piece up against the sides to hold the boards down. So I'll rivet into the sidewall and screw through this to the wood with 1-inch drywall screws. This is just to kind of keep things even as far as that floor goes. I did not glue it down. It's going to be under the real floor, so this is just a little measure to keep it from bouncing. Okay, so I cut the first piece into 3 40-inch pieces. Got them against the edge. Now I'm going to drill them to the wood, after which I will put heavy objects near where I'm working and rivet them to the side walls. I'll first spray some foam behind. Okay, so I have this metal around all the edges of the plywood / insulation here, OSB insulation. So I've also filled in any gaps with spray foam out of a can. So all the way down, we've got the trim in place holding these sheets. Tomorrow I'm going to fill these gaps with construction adhesive and then paint, latex paint, a couple coats on this to waterproof the floor. So between the spray foam and that latex paint, it should be fairly impervious to small leaks. You know, hopefully the water will keep from going underneath the plywood and insulation if we get a leak in plumbing or something like that. So anyhow, that's the plan. We got the floor progressing nicely here. Okay, so we're back at the bus. Today's agenda, you can see the rust up here from water leaking over time. We're going to remove this emergency exit and put a temporary sheet metal piece in because I don't want water dripping down onto the new wood here. So we're going to patch that. Later I'll probably put in a marine hatch, or I'll build my own out of steel for this spot and make it a skylight. Still be an exit, but not a school bus style exit. It'll be more elegant, nicer, and have a skylight built in. So anyhow, that is the plan for today. We're going to get that done, and then we're also going to put the OSB insulation on the back bench. After that, we're going to run construction adhesive down these seams and smooth it out and put a coat of latex paint on this new OSB. So that is the agenda for today. Okay, so I'm going to cut this piece of scrap metal to be the cap for that emergency exit. And the measurements I came up with were 26 5/8 in one direction, and I'm going to do 28 in the other. That should be a perfect fit and give me nice overlap for the caulk front to back. The other dimensions limited by where the structural rails of the roof are. You'll see when I install it. Okay, so I've got the lines drawn here. I already cut 2 edges. I'm going to cut the other 2, and hopefully it'll be a good fit. So anyhow, I wish I had a metal shear that would be a lot more precise than this scissor cutter basically. I'm going to put this side up. I just cleaned both sides with a little paint thinner and a t-shirt rag, so that'll help the adhesive stick better. But this side's going to go up. It's the nicer of the two. So anyhow, I'll probably run a little sandpaper around the edge where the adhesive will be placed, just to ensure that it sticks a bit better. Okay, so I've got that sanded, especially on the edges, and I wiped it down again with paint thinner after sanding, so it should provide a good stick. So at this point I'm going to go, I think I'm going to hit this side with a coat of paint, spray paint, and then I'm going to go up and take that hatch out over there, and that's the hatch that's getting popped out, so I got to unscrew that, but I'll climb on the roof with my outside ladder since it's tall enough. Okay, so that side, which is going to go down, is in place. I'll paint the top side once I'm done, so the fasteners also get coated. But the next step is to, while I let that dry, I'm going to remove the hatch and clean up the sill and probably hit it with a coat of paint. I might use the wire brush on it to clean it up. So that's next. Okay, so this is the first time I'm going on the roof since I raised it. So climb on up here. It's pretty high. A little wobbly up here at 12 feet. Alright, I'm going to lean forward a bit here. This doesn't feel very cozy. Okay. Alright, so I'm up on the bus. Okay, so I've got half the screws out at this point. You can see just how high up we are here. There's one screw over here that I'm going to have to take pliers to or something. It's a little bit difficult. The head stripped basically, so I might slot it with the angle grinder and use a flat blade on it. I'm not sure. Okay, so I had to use the angle grinder on 2 of the screws. I only did a little bit of minor damage to the flange, and now it's hanging from the grounding connection because I forgot to disconnect that. Okay, so we've got this emergency exit out. Now I'm going to use the angle grinder with the wire brush or wire cup, clean up the edges, hit it with some spray paint, and then we'll get the sheet metal in position and use self-tapping screws with the caulk to seal it up. Okay, so I cleaned that up with the wire wheel on the angle grinder and hit it with a coat of white paint. Ultimately the whole roof is going to be white. I don't know if we'll use elastomeric paint or just white spray paint, but either way the roof is going to be white to reflect the heat. So anyhow, we'll let this dry and then I'll put a bead of caulk on it. In the meantime, I'm going to start on the back bench, getting it coated with the insulation boards over there. So for right now I'm getting off the roof and we'll finish this after the paint dries. Alright, so I used some scraps, most of which were actually the right size already, and covered the top here. There's going to be a coating of plywood or Luan over top of that, but for right now that'll work. Now I'm going to take a measurement for the back. I'll be sure to leave space there in the middle for that cover. I'll be using some hex head self-tapper screws or other screws to secure that cover. I'm going to put a bead of caulk under it. I shouldn't need to access it very often, so it doesn't need a gasket. Caulk will be fine. So anyway, I'm going to make sure that's accessible, and then we'll get the rest of this bench done. Alright, so that access has been closed up with self-tappers and caulk. So hopefully I won't need to access that again, but if I do, I know how to get it off. So all we got to do is make sure that the couch seat doesn't permanently close it. Okay, so I've got the back seat here covered with the insulation and board. This will get clad with actual wood at some point to reinforce the structure, and the wood itself will support that bench lip there, and then we'll tie it in over in the corners with some 2x4. But this will work for now. We're going to get this painted up, and eventually this will be a lounging area underneath our master bed. It's going to be able to be lifted up to the ceiling on linear actuators, and that'll allow for additional living space here. I'm thinking a gaming area. My wife and I like to play video games. Be a good place for us to do that. Or if we put lagoon table mounts on the sides near our clothing storage, we'll be able to have desk area here. All kinds of different purposes. Just sort of a secondary living room space. Okay, so I'm on the roof here, about to rivet one end of this piece of sheet metal. I've got caulk going a little bit past this hole right now, so I'll fold it up after I drill the rest of the holes. Okay, so I have it caulked. Okay, so I have it caulked and riveted. Now I'm going to hit it with some white paint. I just smeared caulk really well into the seams, so it should be watertight. Not too many people will be looking at the top of the bus, so you know, it's also going to get coated with other paint eventually, so I'm not real worried about the way it looks. Okay, and that's all done. So now I'm going to go inside and put latex paint on the floor. Okay, so I put construction adhesive in the seams of the OSB, and I cut these strips of sheet metal, and I screwed the seams together just to keep things from getting uneven. So at this point I'm going to put latex paint down from the back to the front. Okay, so I got a coat of paint on the bench. I didn't really pick this color. It was $9 a gallon for $40 paint because it was a mismatched color. So there's 3 gallons, very similar beige tones. This is all not going to be seen, so I went ahead and bought it. Figured it was a light enough color, and it was cheap. Okay, so that was 1 gallon of this paint and primer. I'm actually pretty impressed with this. It's Sherwin-Williams Showcase from Lowe's. Like I said, it was $9 a gallon because it was mistinted by somebody. So the colors are similar. This one's another beige, but not quite the same. So it's a good thing that it's getting all covered by something else. Okay, so all done for the weekend here. The subfloor is in and painted. So at this point, I've got to finish this small line of rivets going down where these pieces of metal are. And then I'll be getting insulation board for the sides. I'm most likely going to hold that in with pieces of sheet metal going across, just kind of riveted in place. So just insulation board covering, and then along the seams of the insulation, the edges, I'll just use spray foam for the small gaps. So that'll be the next step, but right now we're waiting for this paint to dry, and I'm overheated and I'm going to jump in the pool, I think.